Well, Houston, we've been through a lot together. We started in radio 60 years ago. It was such a great gig, my father cautioned me against going into this thing called television, but we did it, and we had a pretty good run. We even went from black and white to color TV, then to high definition. I keep hearing about streaming and digital, and, well, it's a chance to reconnect with my friends and viewers and share stories from our times together throughout these last 6 decades. What do you say, Houston? Let's do this. Hello, friends. I'm Dave Ward, and welcome to Dave Ward and Friends. This is a series of casual conversations with some of the great people I've been fortunate to meet in my 60 years of news broadcasting in radio and television in Houston. And today, look who showed up. Don Nelson, who was with me there at Channel 13 for a lot of years. Don, thank you so much.
You were at the
for
nursery
being
when
here.
I was born. I was in there. You came by and waved and said, I'll see you in a couple of years. No, I almost 40, I guess.
Yeah.
I got there in 75. And you'd been there how long?
Since 69.
Yeah, so you had to jump
Yeah.
on. You and Bob Allen was there, and Ed was there, I think, at the time. So you guys had already kicked off that team.
I've had to admit to people over the years that I was born in Dallas, but I got to Houston as quick as I could.
Yeah.
Grew up in Huntsville. Where are you from? Where were you?
I was born in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, as a matter of fact. Actually, that's a true story. I grew up in Pittsburgh, which is where he was from. He actually was born in Latrobe, home of Rolling Rock, in case, and golfers. But no, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and then I went in the military in the 60s, and then I always said I never went I never went east to the Mississippi after 1967, and I found my way here. And here's what I say. I said, I had 49 other choices. States, where do you want to live? You're not a native Texan. I said, I had 49 other choices, I'll have you know. No, I've been here for, most of my life now.
How did you get to Houston?
By way of Marvin Zimler, who was writing his Many Faces of Marvin in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was on TV there doing Dialing for Dollars, afternoon tea time movie like Johnny Carson used to make fun of years ago. And I was also doing weather, and I had been a disc jockey at a local rock station there, kind of a combo just coming up. Bob Hilton had gone to Boston. He was the guy that was doing Dialing for Dollars then, of which didn't you put it on the air?
Yes, here in
You
Houston.
did, you put it on the air. So I was like 3rd generation or 4th generation Dialing for Dollars after you started. And then I came here, and then, what was it? I got here at 75. And at the same time, ABC had Stephanie Edwards and Bill Butel, AM America. And then it segued into Good Morning America, David Hartman, and then Sandy Hill eventually in 1977. And then remember everybody, like even Cleveland, Morning Exchange, and then Good Morning Houston, Good Morning Anywhere USA, and Jan Glenn came, and thus I started the illustrious career of, I did traffic at 7 to 7:30, and then we would do Good Morning Houston. And then it was hints, tips, advice, 2-minute breaks. You'd go from rocket science to how to curl your dog's hair and back again, and how to make a pie, and then you do, all that, how that goes.
All kinds of stuff.
20-some years. However, in all honesty, we didn't have all the news then. You didn't have an extended morning newscast. You didn't have a midday. You didn't have an early afternoon. You had, and even live at 5 when I first got there. So it was like the morning and the 6 and 10.
Yep.
So if anything happened between then, we often found ourselves, as we called us, we were part of the sofa circuit. We were just like news, except we sat on a sofa. But disasters, oil explosions, a lot of them. Remember, a lot of the plants would catch on fire.
Oh yeah.
And they'd have to springboard off us, and we'd be on doing phoners while everybody scattered with trucks to get it to go. So we had our moments of news glory, along with many other craziness, and met a lot of different people too. So
my first news anchor job was on the 7 a.m. news. And when, I'll never forget this, the manager at the time was a man named Willard Walbridge. He called us all into the conference room down there. There were only 9 people in the news department at that time. 9 guys, you know. And he announced he was taking Ray Conaway off the 6 and 10 o'clock news to make him editorial director. And he put this kid who was a booth announcer on the 6 and 10. He didn't last very long. And then he said, and Dave Ward will be anchoring our 7 a.m. news. I didn't even know we had a 7 a.m. news. I didn't. I'd been working for the 6 and the 10, which were the only 2 newscasts I thought that Channel 13 did. And I asked him, I said, well, Mr. Walbridge, what do we do at 7 a.m.? Is that a 5-minute newscast, 15 minutes? And he bristled. He said, no, Dave, that is a full 30-minute newscast.
Wow.
As you would know if you watch the television station where you work. And so I started, my first anchor position was on the 7 a.m. news. I had to get there at 5 a.m. because it was a one-man band. I had to re-edit film from the night before, rewrite scripts, pull all the wire copy. It took, an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to get ready to go on the air.
We had a producer. Oh God, I can't think of his name. African American. He was one of the first in the business, I think, and he was a producer and a writer. And so he was like the backup. Okay, so one morning, I forget, somebody didn't show up or whatever, and he didn't know about it. He was so busy, there was a lot of news that day. And so at the last minute, he says, there's no one that can do the news. So he runs into the dressing room, and there's like a sport coat hanging on a hook, right? And I see him, because we're all putting Nick, and he disappears with the coat, he's holding it. So here comes the news, and he walks out, and he was like 6'2", and the coat was like a 34 regular. He sits down, he's got his copy here, and his shirt starts about here, and it goes all the way down to the paper. And he didn't flinch, man. He just kept reading it, and he goes, and then he felt like he had to have that bravado, and that's the news this morning. I said, he probably hasn't had any blood up to here in about a half hour. It was so funny. God, I never forgot that. But the mornings were totally different than the evenings. It's a different life.
Really, totally.
You got to get up in the middle of the night. Some people are getting home. Actually, I used to say this. We lived in, first house I had was in Kingwood. That's back when, you just drove and drove and drove. And they're doing it. They still do it. They just further out now. Now they live in Hempstead and they drive in, But I was in Kingwood, and I'd be going past the Country Western Bar at 2 in the morning going to work. They were just dumping out heading to Denny's. It was in the same parking lot. And I got a tie on, and I kind of going, this is so wrong for so many reasons. So, and then a couple times you'd be so far from home, I had a pickup, and I put my coat on the pickup to get in, and I got in, and I forgot. And I got down to the studio, and I realized my pickup was on the East Tex, or my sport coat was on the East Tex Freeway somewhere. So we're asking people if they see a coat that had, some nice tire marks on it, please send it over. It was brutal. But no.
Talking about the weather, did you ever know my co-anchor Dan Ammerman? He was gone.
I met Dan. He was a consultant then. He was teaching corporations, but I've got a chance to meet him at a couple of functions.
He was a co-anchor with me for a short time, and one night, Troy Dungan was the weather guy.
Sure.
And he was on vacation.
Yeah.
So they hired this guy to come in and do the weather. Well, on the 6 o'clock news, he did the weather. Everything's fine. We come back on the air at 10 o'clock, and this guy hadn't shown up. We found out later, he thought the 10 was a videotape of the 6. Give me a break. No newscast we ever did was a videotape of it.
Wow.
Well, anyway, we come down to the break before weather, and the crew chief steps out from behind the camera, and he says, this weather guy didn't show up. You guys, you and Ammerman, you two are going to have to do the weather. And I said, well, wait a minute. He's standby queue. Well, we had to do the weather, and I started out, and I said, well, it's time now for the weather. Let's take a look at the national weather map. And they showed the United States. And I said, as you can see, there are H's and L's there, and they're moving generally from left to right.
Yeah.
And I said, now Dan has the forecast. Well, that's when we had these little sandwich boards where you put up the
Sure.
individual letters.
Yeah.
And it said 1-2 scattered, SCTD, thunder showers.
Right.
Teach NDR SWRS or something like that. Airman reads it, and there will be 1 to 2 inches of rain in scattered thunderstorms. And I had to correct him. I said, no, Dan, I think that just means 1 or 2 scattered showers. And he says, well, that's so insignificant, we shouldn't even mention that. That was the last time they ever had us do the weather. That was it. We never did the weather ever again.
Oh my God.
But you did the weather for...
I did it for, well, you know what? No, here's what happened. Ed had to leave for a while. They moved Doug Brown to the evenings. And then I had done the weather in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. And so, well, you know, the weather in Albuquerque, the sun shines 365 days a year. So, and there'd be a thunderstorm about 100 miles away you could still see from town. And so other than just mentioning temperatures, you know, it was one of the add-on jobs. And it was one of those, oh, and by the way, you're also going to do this. And oh, by the way, you're also going to do this. That's what I mean. I ended up like Mikey. I used to tell people, I said, you remember those commercials where let Mikey try it? You know, it was like a cereal thing. That's what my career is. They said, I was Mikey. Because none of the guys, a lot of people didn't want to do it, or it was like not part of their deal. And so they said, send what's his name to go. Yeah. Speaking of boards and stuff, here's one. We had this huge, when I first got there, they had this ceiling, you know, we had 25-foot ceilings. Mm-hmm. And they had this big map of greater Houston, right? And we had these arrows with magnets. They were magnets, right? And that's how they stuck on there. Well, your buddies, and perhaps you, I could ask you right now if you're guilty. On the 10 o'clock news, when it was a bad night or you got bored, you used to get all the magnets said slow, accident, whatever, and you'd sit on the set, which was directly across from it, and you'd see how high you could throw them up in the air to get them to stick. So I would come in the morning, and my first job with a rake, I'd have to go get a thing to pull all of them off the ceiling so I could get them, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I must admit to you, I saw some of my coworkers throw those magnets.
But you had nothing to do with it.
I never did. As best I can remember, I never threw any of those things up there because I knew how much work it was to.
Oh no, we had a good time.
Get those things off.
A couple of quick stories. Well, let me, because I know what you were talking about, old timers and stuff like that. Well, Kederick was famous. KTRK.
Yes.
It was the cat, right? So when I get there, I'm doing Dialing for Dollars, which was kind of like, at that point, no offense, it was a cross between the Art Linkletter's house party and Mad Magazine.
Yeah, really.
It was. These poor women would come in. There was, you know, some would be dressed up, some wouldn't be. They had warm Dr. Pepper and a cupcake was their little snack that they got. You know, and it was unbelievable. Anyway, we're sitting there one day, and I'm looking there, and I notice this woman, and she's got a skull cap on. Okay. I don't say anything, and she's smiling, you know, and doing this and this. This is Monday. Tuesday, she comes in, she's got these little ears, you know, on the skull cap. Monica, oh, okay. Next day, Wednesday, she's got the bodysuit, okay? And I started worrying then because she had a big handbag too, and I'm going, okay, you wanna check the bag? Well, the fourth day, she shows up with a tail, and I go, and what had happened was she, in her mind, had figured out that they hadn't seen Kederick, and they were looking for a new one. And she was basically auditioning for the job of Kederick.
My goodness.
We had to call her in. I didn't do it. Somebody called her and said, you know, you don't need to be wearing that on the air. Oh my gosh. And another time, we used to dial, you know, for groceries or something, you know, something like that with a phone. And this woman had brought her 80-some-year-old mom with her, and they're sitting directly behind the podium, Paul Schmidt and Betty Rogers.
Yes.
For those of you that remember way back, he was a piano player, he used to play the Court Club, and Betty Rogers was married to Tom Rogers. He was in PR, and they loved to travel, and she was just a wonderful person. Anyway, so what you saw, we're going to call somebody over to dial for food or the prizes, and they hit the phone. So Paul goes, Mrs. Martha Dimwitter, where are you, Martha? And right behind the podium, right? This lady stands up, and she has to take one step to get to the podium. She hooks her heel on the carpet, and what people at home saw was an 86-year-old woman drop out of sight, just like, whew. And then Paul goes, watch that first step. We'll be right back. And then we're going like, that's it, it's over. I mean, live TV is what it was.
Yes.
I think that's, when people ask me what it was like, I said, first of all, we were, now, there was no Zoom and that kind of stuff. Everybody was live, They traveled in planes, they stayed at hotels. Supper clubs were still having stars that come in, and things like that. And they would always make the local talk show. Well, Nancy Ames was on at noon on Channel 2 with Danny. Mm-hmm. And then we were on at 9. And so people were physically in front of you, physically. And it was, you never knew it was going to happen. It was insane.
Dave Ward and Friends is proud to be supported by the brand new 135,000 plus square foot Porsche River Oaks dealership from our friends at Sonic Automotive. I've known a lot of Porsche owners in my time, and one thing they've told me is that they really enjoy sitting down and specking out the Porsche of their dreams. The newly opened River Oaks Porsche will not only allow you to do that, but Porsche North America has broadened the allocation of all model types just for this new state-of-the-art River Oaks facility. General Sales Manager Carrie Jo McCrory and her entire team are excited to get you into the personalized Porsche of your dreams. It's now open in River Oaks. Tell them Dave Ward sent you. You mentioned Kederick.
Yeah.
Her name was Bunny Orsak.
Right. I met Bunny.
She's a beauty and still living out in New Mexico. And I talked with her not too long ago for this series, Dave Ward and Friends.
Sure.
And we did it by Zoom. And she talked about Kederick's carousel, where the little children would ride around on the carousel, and she would interview them. It was their birthday. And she said one little girl stood out to when the little girl came around to Kederick had your name, and you're 5 years old or 6 years old. What do you want to be when you grow up? And the little girl wanted to say, I want to be a cowgirl. Only she said, I want to be a call girl. And Bunny said, oh, you want to work for the phone company. That's so nice. But
oh God,
Bunny and Kederick was unbelievable, and they took her off the air after 16 years. Masucci took her off the air to put on what they call the $1 Million movie in the afternoon.
Many voiceovers.
Oh boy, those movies.
You remember when they switched reels and the last reel was in French?
I didn't remember that.
They were often 3 reels. I mean, this is back before. This was so funny because this was back when 16 millimeter film.
Yes, I shot a lot of it.
And 2-inch tape, big reel to reel, and then projectors and all that. It was totally different. It was in its early stages.
When you came to 13, we were in color.
Yes, we were in color. Just 2 though, 3 tops.
We had
maybe a beige and
we had
a pink.
The station was in black and white when I went to work.
No
there.
kidding.
And
I didn't know that.
It didn't become color until 72, 73, something like that.
Wow.
We were the last station in the city to go color, but we finally did.
Wow. No, I know. Behind the scenes, but
behind the scenes, you met your wife there at Channel 13.
Margaret. Well, I guess meet is one of those terms. Margaret O'Brien, Margaret O'Brien Molina at the time, I think she was married by then, was a producer. She did news, she did Live at 5, she did Good Morning Houston, did a couple of things. She'd come and gone and came back and so on. And to say the least, when she did Good Morning Houston, how can I put this? She would look at me and go, okay, now what is your purpose here? She thought I was an idiot. And we didn't like each other. Oh my gosh, it was awful. We battled back and forth, and it was, one thing led to another, and she, it was insane. And I would do stuff to her, like I had a pair of these milk white contact lenses I got from Frankel's Costume when they first came out. They make your eyes look just totally white. And it was the day of the eclipse when they were telling everybody on the air to put a pinhole on a piece of cardboard and hold it up, and so you wouldn't hurt your eyes and you could see the eclipse and all that. So we were in the office and we both had windows looking outside the back parking lot. And so she was back there, and that's back when everybody smoked, So you're back there, one in your hand, one in the ashtray, and it's TV, it's what it is. And so I put these things in. And I go, Margaret, I don't know what all your griping is, and you're telling all these people. I said, I've been looking at this thing now for 20 minutes. That's okay. And I turned to her, and she turned to me to get ready to yell at me for something. And I had these big white eyes with no pupils, and she jumped 14 feet in the air, called me every expletive I think that sits out there, and she even made a few up, Anyway, long story short, and she left and then went on her merry way to do something, and I did the same. 2000, and both of our spouses passed away, 2009, 2010. And so in 2013, she's doing a fundraiser for St. Dominic's. And she needed an auctioneer, so I hadn't seen her in 20 years, whatever. And so we decided to meet at a restaurant just to kind of catch up and everything, and I didn't know anything about her, other than somebody said they saw her on Facebook or something, and she was riding a bicycle and she was doing the MS 150 or whatever. And I go, okay. So we see each other and we get to talking, and we realized that, and I would assume this would be in the medical field or any legal field, but in our respective broadcast field, that it's like being in a carnival. Once you're part of that, it's a lifestyle and a language and a sense of familiarity that never leaves you. And we hadn't seen each other in 20 years, and in 15 minutes, you'd swore we just picked up where we left off. And so we started, and don't even ask why we started seeing each other. And then I realized that, TV had a comfort zone in its own life. And so we just ended up going all the way and getting married, and life's good. Although, there's one thing. When I was on TV and she was in the booth as the producer, she used to yell in my ear, and go, rap, this is rap.
Wrap it up, yeah.
So this isn't going anywhere. Let's move it along here. This isn't where I thought it was going to go. Did you ask that question? No, let's just get out of there, right? Well, now at home, she just looks me in the eye and go, rap, come on. I don't need an earpiece. Although I told her, I says, why don't we start wearing earpieces at home? That'll be really cool in a way. So maybe for Christmas, I'll get her an earpiece and she can yell at me and I'll yell at her back. No, but it's ironic how that happened, because it just works really well. We really have a great time, And I think because people that are in the business, it's real hard to explain it to someone who's not in it.
I know.
You know what I mean?
True.
It's just the way it is. So to run across somebody who's already been down that road, it made it so much easier. You don't have to explain anything. You just that person.
You and Margaret live down on the bay.
We have, we kept. I call it a grandma house. We have one in Houston that I call it a stay up people say, hey, you got to tear down, you know, because all these old neighborhoods, as soon as they're for sale, the claw comes in and clears the lot, and then there comes big, some 6,000 square footer, you know, that barely fits on the lot. But we have one of the few, well, I said there's several, but the little original houses. And then we ran into a fixer-upper down in Galveston area, and we took that on, and we spend most of our time down there. Well, man, we go back and forth, depending on doctor's appointments.
Yeah, there you go.
You know how that goes, you know.
Well, when you're down there on the bay, what's your day like?
Day? Oh, you mean you get up during the day? That's what I thought you know. You mean like, what, noon, something, 1 o'clock maybe?
Whatever.
No, I'm kidding. She's an artist. She resurrected her art career, or art major, and she's been really doing really well. I have a boat, do a little fishing, love to cook, play around, you know. I mean, the idea you don't have to be, every day is Saturday. You don't have to be anywhere specifically. An occasional public service of sort, you know, whatever. And then, you know, just whatever I want to do, actually. It's and then we enjoy just, it's so panoramic. Now, here's the thing. I'll start worrying. Well, we had the freeze, you know, this big freeze. And boy, that clobbered everybody, because, you know, everybody has those bay houses that are up, and that plumbing took a major hit for a lot of people.
I can imagine.
Oh, and water. You know, that was the other thing, too. Everybody's talking about that, our water supply and everything. Well, now we're getting close. You know, all it takes is a couple national stories. Well, it looks like hurricane season's going to start early, you know, and all I'm going, oh, here we go. So you got to have your plan, you know. And I said, please don't make me go to Costco and buy bottled water and toilet paper yet, please, you know, because everybody now is trying to time it out, you know. You don't want to get caught with too much in your cart this early, because then that'll start a run, you know, and then you got problems. But I brought this just to tell you, you know, I was looking at this, give you an example. In 83, I was looking at this, you know, things about Houston. 155 office buildings were completed in 12 months in 1983. That's the growth thing, right? And then in 87, the recession hit, but they still had Wortham Center, it opened up in the GRB. And this is the one I really like, 2000, right? Remember 2000? Minute Maid Park opens, 2002 NRG opens, 2002 Hobby Center opens, 2003 Toyota Center opens. So you can't, I mean, this is a monster city, you know, it's just gonna keep growing.
You know, Minute Maid Park is where the train station was when I was a child, Union Station.
Oh yeah.
And when they going to make it into a baseball park, I thought, why don't they call it Union Stadium? It was Union Station. Now it could be Union Stadium. No, it's Minute Maid Park.
Well, yeah. It's like remember the sci-fi rollerball, where instead of having a town named a park, you know, certain fields and stuff, they were all sponsored. That was a science fiction. Minute Maid, NRG, Toyota Center. It's all corporate now, you know. And pretty soon, somebody said, "You watch, those cities will be corporate." You'll go instead of going to Chicago, you'll go to Tesla.
Yeah.
I'm going to go visit my relatives in Tesla, Illinois. You know, someplace like that.
You talked about all the buildings that were built in 2002, whatever it was. Yeah. When I moved to Houston,
right,
in 1962,
right,
there were like 5 major buildings under construction in downtown Houston. They were just topping out the Humble Building.
Wow.
At that time,
was the Loop built yet? 610?
No, there was no.
I was going to say that sounds right. 610.
No Loop that I can remember, but they were just topping out the Humble Building at 44 stories. It was the tallest building west of the Mississippi, and I thought, if this city, if growing like this is a fantastic city. I came to work in Houston in radio at KNUZ Radio. It's no longer on the air, but that was my first real full-time news reporting job. Before that, I had been disc jockey too. I'd started in Tyler, and then 2 years in Waco, WACO radio in Waco. One of the only radio stations in the name
What kind of
the
music?
city. Oh, in Waco, it was, depending on the time of day, it could be anything. Rock and roll, it could be country. And we had a morning show that I ended up on the board. The early morning DJ was a guy named, I can't remember his name, but he'd been there for years. He came to work, he signed the station on, like at 6 o'clock in the morning, or 5 o'clock in the morning, and was on that board until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the longest board trick I had ever heard of anywhere.
God.
Goodson McKee, that was his name.
Wow.
Well, shortly after I came to work there at WACO, about a year, Goodson retired. They put me on that shift. And from 11 to 12 noon, they had this woman, she called herself Mary Holiday, and she would come on and talk to recipes and interview people and this, that, and the other. And her theme song was Vaughn Monroe singing Racing with the Moon.
That's a 78. That's not even a.
Yeah.
That's
well,
not even a 33.
That thing
That's
up.
a 78.
I had to cue that thing up and play it at the beginning and in commercial breaks and during that whole hour. To this day, if Vaughn Monroe comes on my car radio, I turn him off. I can't stand that guy's voice.
You know, to go back on something we talked about, the buildings and stuff in Houston,
Yeah.
there's two things. One is, I remember when I first got here, 75, I got to go to dinner at the Hyatt Regency on the revolving. Remember that? Yeah. Go look at the view now. Remember, that was the view, you know, you could see everywhere, excuse me.
It's surrounded by taller buildings.
And then back where the train station was, that was also called NoHo, North Houston, where the metro ended up. And, so that was all those buildings down there. The Last Chance Cafe is down there. It used to be, it still might be. And then the Butte Paint Company became that first high rise of those, and all the old eclectic artists and people that, you know, because there were no apartments. You just go down there and they'd sell you or they'd rent you these old warehouses down there by the square foot, and people would be down there. It was like a high, you know, like a studio. They'd come and sandblast all those old girders and stuff. And I went and interviewed, because we used to do a thing on Good Morning Houston about going to people's homes and things. And we went to this guy's house down in NoHo. And it was the coolest place, and it had its own little bathroom in a corner, but the rest of it was, you know, you could play football in there. It was huge. And then he started walking me around the neighborhood, and you could hear bands rehearsing. You could see through the window, people had their easels up where they were painting. I just thought that was NoHo. And I think it's still to some degree around, you know. I mean, I have not checked it out in months or years for that matter, but that was the coolest place. And then Minute Maid came. Yeah. They pushed that, a lot of that got eaten up, so. And then there's, what do they have now? Edo, east of downtown. It's where, what's the lumber company? Ocean's Lumber or something's down there. It's on, oh gosh, there's a railroad track right there, but they have all the townhomes, fast as you can see, and it goes all the way down to Harrisburg. There's a whole development that hasn't even touched yet that still has to be developed, so I'll be fishing. Yeah.
I may come down and go fishing with you.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? Hey, listen, I'm ready. I can, that we can handle.
Speaking of the great people that I met in this industry, you are one of them, my friend.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming here. Thank you for being with me today. And I want to thank you for joining me here for Dave Ward and Friends. Thank you. Yuval Michler of Texas Mattress Makers immigrated to Houston when he was 18 and is a shining example of what makes Houston so great. It's the people. He's doing great things for our community. Here are a few words from him.
If you spend your money and you buy things that are from outside of your community, you're basically taking the good that you can do in your own community and you're distributing it to other places. At Texas Mattress Makers, we make mattresses where we all live. Foam we buy from Brenham, from Waco. Our springs come from Ennis, Texas, which is south of Dallas. Lumber comes from Louisiana. Cardboard from Houston. Plastic from Houston. If I take my money and I spend it overseas or wherever else, I basically stole someone's job here in Texas or Houston. I'm always going to have our community in my forefront when it comes to business. At Texas Mattress Makers, we're the only team in Houston with our own factory.
Get your best night's sleep with up to 30% plus free delivery on select mattresses.
We do one thing. We create the best mattresses in Texas.